Together, growing in faith, changing communities.
Together, growing in faith, changing communities. My dear brothers and sisters, on this last day of this month of this year, 2021, the Holy Mother Church gives us two readings. The first one, obviously coming from the letter, the epistle of John. And John has something important to say. He says at the end of time, there will be people known as Antichrist. They are in the world. They come through us or from us, but they are not of us. And in here, briefly, I just want to highlight that these so-called Antichrist that John speaks of were once believers, were once men and women who held Christianity at a very high level. But along the way, along the journey, they lost their faith in God. And unfortunately, they then became the enemy of the truth. They became the enemy of the gospel. And so my question is that possible for us? And I want to argue and say, yes, it's possible. It's possible to have a relationship with God. It's possible at some stage to fall in love with God, to be crazy about God, to be a custodian of the truth. But along the way, through the influence of friends and colleagues, through the difficulties of life, we can lose the truth. We can lose that which once gave us life. It's okay to go through a crisis. I call it a spiritual crisis. That's okay, and that's normal. We all go through that in our lives. The danger happens for me when we become the opposite or the enemy of the truth. When we start to bash and when we start to go all out in trying to discredit or in trying to teach that which is not the truth. That is when we become the enemy of the gospel. And that is important from time to time to check the pulse and ask ourselves, am I still living according to the principles of God? Do I still believe in God? Do I still do that which God and His Holy Mother Church continues to hold and to teach? That's the first thing. The second thing that I also find absolutely interesting is an answer to the dilemma that John in the epistle talks about. And what is the answer? Jesus is the answer. He is the solution to our problems. And He gives us three dimensions that are important. The first one, Jesus Christ is the light of the world. He is the light that dispels all darkness. He is the light that is able to penetrate in and through our lives. He is the light that can lead us into something absolutely great. But there's something that I also believe that he talks about when he talks about the light as God is the light. The concept of insights. To have an insight into things. To be able to see things differently. To be able to meditate through our own lives. And the insight for me is most likely to come when I reflect about my life. How has life been for me? How have I lived? How have I shown the mercy of God? How have I led myself into the presence of God? And how have I allowed God to dispel the darkness, to remove the prejudices, and to heal my brokenness. What about in our own families, in our own homes, in our own workplace, among our own friends and siblings and colleagues? What are the things that gives us life? What are the things that gives us meaning? The other thing that I also find absolutely interesting that John gives us about Jesus Christ is that Jesus Christ makes a home in us. John 1, chapter 1, verse 14 rather. The Word was made flesh and made its home among us. So the question for me is quite simple. Has God made a home in my own life? Have I allowed God to be the one that directs my way, that directs my life? Do I speak to Him, or do I also allow Him to speak to me in my own life? The third principle, the Word that has become flesh and lived among us has shown us the glory of God. Jesus Christ is supposed to lead us into God. Jesus Christ is supposed to show us this is who God is, and this is what God asks of us in our lives. And because of that, our lives need to change, and we ought to live that which God wants us to become. Thandwa zami kunento engiyibona uNkulunkulu esibizela yona. Uma kuwukuthi siyawuphetha lo nyaka, zimbalwa izinto ekumele sidlule kuzona. Eyokuqala ukubonga uNkulunkulu. Siyambonga uNkulunkulu ngoba akuhambanga ngokwazi nokuqonda nokuhlakanipha kwethu. Konke kungumusa wakhe. Esiyikona namhlanje kungumusa. Okwesibili ukuqonda ukuthi ey'ntweni ey'ningi ezenzekile, iningi labantu iyodwa into ehlala ey'nhliziyweni zabo. Yebo unyaka uyaphela kodwa asiphelele. Abanye sebehambile. Lobo buhlungu abusoze baphela. Lelo nxeba alisoze lasuka. Singakwenza sikhohlwe, kodwa ikhona lento eshoyo ukuthi abanye, this is the first time bephetha unyaka, inhlobo zabo zingekho. Abanye kunezinto esezenzekile ebadalela usizi, ebadalela inyembezi. Kodwa ebekumele mhlambe sibuyele kona ukuthi uNkulunkulu akalenzi iphutha. Yebo kwenzekile, angisho ukuthi uyena okwenzile, kodwa ugcine evumile. Ngoba uvumile, asiceleni asinikeze amandla okuba sikwazi ukuqhubeka, siqhubekele phambili. Okwesithathu engikubuka kubalekile uNkulunkulu engimbona esibizela ukona, ungalahli ithemba. Sithi isiZulu akulahlwa mbeleko ungafiwe. Uba izinto zingahambelanga kahle, zingenzekanga njengesifiso sakho, ngimbona uNkulunkulu esinikeza elinye ithuba lokuba sizame ukwenza izinto kangconywana. Sizame mhlambe nokuguqula indlela esenza ngayo. Kodwa ekupheleni kwakho konke ngiyamthanda uverse 14 evangelini likaJohannes lokuqala. izwi labanyama lahlala phakathi kwethu sabona inkazimulo kaNkulunkulu. Uma sikwazi ukungena kulonyaka ozayo sibanjwe isandla sikaNkulunkulu, asingasabi sithuke ukuthi ngazunyaka ozayo usiphetheleni. Asitsheleni ukuthi noma ngathiwa usiphatheleni unyaka ozayo, so long as uNkulunkulu engibambe ngesandla angisabi lutho ngoba uhleli wami uyaphila. Ngegama likaYise benendodana nomoya ogcweleyo.